You may return the favor a little.
But I've been sending $1,000 every month for 20 years, haven't I? I think I've given you more money than just college tuition.
I don't think that we have been taken care of just for a measly $1,000.
That's right, don't get too cocky.
I was speechless. They have really never cared about me at all. My name is Mary. Ever since I was a child, I loved books and visited the library daily, devouring all kinds of books. Perhaps because of this, I developed the habit of looking up anything that attracted my interest by reading books, and this directly linked to my academic performance. I naturally loved acquiring knowledge, and my school tests were almost always perfect scores. However, my parents never doted on me. Always reading books, it's creepy. I still remember Mom once muttered, "Although I say it myself, I guess I was a kind of person who could manage everything." There was a time when I was brought by my mom to learn swimming and tennis, but I just went through the motions and seemed uninterested, so she quickly made me quit. For me, reading was more enjoyable, so it was a wish come true, but my mom apparently wanted a child who was active and lively through sports. When I was 10, my sister Camille was born. With her bright and twinkling eyes, even as a baby, it was predicted she'd grow up to be adorable. My parents, as if letting out all their pent-up affection, doted on my sister. She was always smiling and had the type of charm that endeared her to everyone. Unlike me, she was good at asking for things, so she appeared very lovable to our parents. Whether I aced a mock exam or got accepted into a prestigious high school didn't matter to them. Yet, they praised her for getting a 70% on an elementary school test, exclaiming, "She's a genius." Dealing with this kind of sibling disparity was tough, even as a child, but the age gap of 10 years was probably a blessing in disguise. When I was in high school, since my sister was only 7 or 8, I could rationalize that there was no point in being jealous of a child. After graduating high school, I got into university on my first attempt. It was a public university's medical school, so my life at that time were truly filled with nothing but study. But my sister was always loud, laughing at the TV. And at night she'd be on the phone with friends or laughing at comics in the next room, making it hard for me to concentrate on my studies. So I asked my parents if I could live on my own, but they refused, saying, "We don't have money to waste on that." That's why I found myself going to the library. I went frequently as a child to continue my medical studies. But at 22, I was suddenly summoned by my parents.
"Hey, did you flunk a year?"
They asked. "Huh? No, I didn't," I replied.
Then why are we still getting bills for tuition?
You have to graduate after 4-year studies.
I could say nothing. It seemed that my parents were unaware that medical school took 6 years to complete. When I explained, they exploded, calling me an expensive nuisance. As even they tried to make me quit university, I begged them and promised to work and pay back the last 2 years' tuition, and somehow they let me continue my studies. Those next 2 years living at home were incredibly suffocating. Mom would constantly say things like, "Oh, if it weren't for Mary's tuition, we could buy Camille whatever she wants." Camille too would complain, "If I get left out because I can't afford what's trendy because of you, how will you make it up to me?" Despite it all, I persevered and graduated from university. Then I left home and began working as a medical intern. The internship paid very little, and paying back my parents for tuition was incredibly tough. Still, they insisted I keep my promise, so I sent them as much as I could afford each month. At that time, I was paying back $300 to $500 a month for tuition. My parents urged me to pay more, saying, "A doctor can afford more," but when I showed them that interns really don't make much, they reluctantly agreed. To make those payments, I cut back on food and got quite thin, which I looked unhealthy. Still, I worked hard and, after a few years, I was able to pay off the 2 years' tuition I had promised, and at 30, I finally became an internist, moving on from being a medical intern. My salary increased significantly, and my life became much more comfortable. I didn't become a doctor for the money, but after the impoverished life of an intern, I felt happy to increase the income. Amidst all this, my mother happened to come to the hospital where I work, and it was revealed that I had become an internist. After that, I was barraged with phone calls. If I kept ignoring, I felt she would just come to the hospital again, so I finally answered the phone. Mom was thrilled, saying, "Internists earn a great salary, don't they? I'm so proud that my daughter has become so successful." I intuitively felt that she would ask for something, and as I expected, she had a request.
Actually, you see, your sister Camille is getting married.
What? Really? Isn't she only 20? That's quite early.
Well, she's pregnant.
Oh, I see.
So, here's the thing, if you would mind, could you help with the wedding expenses?
What?
Camille is still young, and her husband doesn't earn much. So, just the two of them can't afford a wedding ceremony. Please, Mary, you're the only one I can turn to.
My heart was swayed by these words from my mother. I must have been starving for parental affection all this time. After all, my parents did put me through college, and they paid my tuition for 4 years. I thought perhaps I should repay that kindness, so I decided to cover the wedding expenses. My sister and parents were overjoyed, and I was happy. I felt like I had finally joined the family circle. But this act would lead to my parents and sister carrying away. A few months after my sister's wedding, I received another call from my mother. Apparently, she hurt her lower back and couldn't work her part-time job anymore. It seems my parents and sister were living together at the family home, and my sister, busy with childcare, couldn't work. As a result, the household finances were very tight. My mother asked, crying, "Could you possibly help us with about $1,000 a month?" Caught up in the euphoria of the wedding, I couldn't bear to ignore my saddened mother and agreed to send $1,000 each month. Looking back, I feel silly for agreeing to it, but at the time, I was under the mistaken impression that it was bringing me familial love. Ever since I started sending money, my parents and sister became very kind to me, regularly inviting me to the house and coming over to visit. I was happy with this and, before I knew it, I had been sending them $1,000 a month for 20 years. I must have become numb, thinking supporting them was a filial duty and just what was expected. Over those 20 years, my circumstances have changed. I got married and had a child who's now 12 years old. Amidst this, my parents brought up the idea of living together. Their legs weren't what they used to be, and they suggested moving in together. They offered to look after my child during the day in my stead and help with household chores. About 10 years ago, my sister's family moved out, and they felt lonely just by themselves. My parents wanted to live in the condo where my husband and I resided. After discussing it with my husband and son, both agreed, so we decided to have my parents move in. My parents brought quite a lot of stuff with them.
Well, we couldn't really declutter, haha.
Well, we do have a few spare rooms, so I guess it's okay. After all the luggage was moved in, my sister suddenly appeared. Camille, what are you doing here?
What do you mean? Haha, I'm going to live here too?
What?
This must be my room.
My sister said, starting to unpack her things. It seemed our parents had brought her belongings too. When I pressed them for an explanation, it turned out that my sister had already divorced and had started living on her own, so she decided to move in with our parents. They thought it would be better than our old family home to move into the upscale apartment where I lived. You could have discussed with me a little. It's terrible to just decide on your own without saying a word. As I grumbled, my parents snapped back at me.
Leaving Camille alone would be pitiful, wouldn't it?
You wouldn't have the life you have now if we hadn't paid for your college.
You may return the favor a little.
But I've been sending $1,000 every month for 20 years, haven't I? I think I've given you more than the cost of college.
We don't remember being taken care of for a mere $1,000.
That's right. Don't get ahead of yourself.
I was speechless. They really didn't care about me. at all. That's awful.
Haha, if it's that shocking, why don't you just stop sending money? Well, I won't need it anymore since I'm moving in here. Haha.
As I stood there dumbfounded, my husband, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up.
But it's going to be quite cramped with 3 more people moving in. Mary, how about we let them live here and we move out?
What? What are you talking about?
Come on, Mary. Honestly, living together in this betrayed state is impossible, right? It would be easier if we just moved out.
At first, I didn't understand what my husband meant. But as he continued, I grasped his intent.
Change the name on the deed of this apartment to Father and make it entirely your place, please.
My parents and sister were overjoyed.
Mary, at least you picked a good man.
It makes things easier. Haha.
So this apartment becomes ours? Awesome.
All right, if my husband says so, I'll happily give it up. And so we contacted the property management company, prepared the paperwork, and said, just sign here, and the name change will be completed, having my father sign it. Afterward, we moved to a different apartment. A few months later, I received a call from my parents.
Hey, what's the meaning of this? Why should we be charged rent every month?
I couldn't help but find it amusing and said something spiteful. What? Well, you can't live in a house for free, haha.
That's not the point. Isn't this the apartment you had bought?
Oh, that? Haha. Sorry, but it is a rental, you know, haha.
What? We didn't hear anything about that. Such an important detail.
You didn't ask me, haha.
Don't mess with us.
The rent is $2,500 a month, right? If you can pay that, you can stay, so it's not bad, right? Haha.
You should know we can't afford to pay such an amount every month.
Oh, is that so? My husband and I could easily afford that.
In that case, can't you live here with us?
What? Are you kidding me? You always tricked and used me conveniently. How can I live with people like that now?
We are to be blamed. I apologize, so please help us. If this continues, we won't be able to pay the rent and will get kicked out. We've already sold the old house. At least, can you restart sending just $1,000 a month?
Sorry, but that's no longer my concern. This is where I cut ties with you.
That's. Wait, please.
I hung up the phone as it was. In the background, I could hear my mother and sister panicking, screaming. They must have been quite desperate. I felt really good. My parents and sister must have thought they could live a carefree life in a home of their own. Apparently, they had splurged on all sorts of luxury furniture, electronics, clothes, hobbies, and other items, and the combined payments for those and the rent had significantly depleted my father's retirement fund. And it seemed they got kicked out of their condo and had to settle for a cheap apartment. Apparently, the new furniture and appliances they'd just bought did not fit in the smaller apartment, so they had to sell everything at less than half price. Both my parents and my sister were blaming each other, yelling, "This is all your fault." It seemed that family relations have hit rock bottom. Seriously, they thought of just themselves, even in times like these. On the other hand, I first moved to a rental condo with my husband and son, and then we built a new house. My husband was a director at a major company, so our combined annual income was quite heavy. hefty. That allowed us to build quite a luxurious home. I've caused my husband and son some trouble because of my inadequacies, so I paid for most of the construction costs of our house. My husband has really helped me all this. I met him when I was still sending money home and my parents and Emily were trying to cozy up to me, so he probably thought I got along well with my parents. Yet, he instantly saw through their true colors and came up with that kind of instant plan, which I thought is amazing. And he has really treasured me, despite everything. That's why I want to make sure I am not disgusted by my husband and son. From now on, I plan to love them even more than before and spend the money I used to waste on my parents on them instead.